If you live with someone who has a drinking problem, you are enabling that person to be an alcoholic. Think about it. You help him drink more, even though you love him, or maybe snort, or whatever you're doing today. Wendy Parks is such a person. You live with a guy for 2.5 years. He was an alcohol and cocaine abuser. Mm-hmm. How do you feel responsible for this, Wendy?
Well, I don't feel responsible for it anymore. I think he had a problem when I went into the relationship, but I believed, although people told me that it wasn't possible, that I could help him, that I saw what was incredible about him inside, the beauty in him and the strength in him, and I thought if I could focus on that enough, that he would see it too and wouldn't need the abusive.
Uh-huh. But you do identify yourself as an enabler.
I identify myself as an enabler.
Tell me what did you do, just specifically, what kind of behavior is enabling?
Anything that way supports him to keep
like
doing
what?
it. Like, for instance, if they treat you in a way that isn't right for you, if there's disrespect and you let it happen, you allow it to happen, there are so many symptoms of a disease. For instance, there's 144 symptoms of alcoholism besides drinking. People don't know that. They think there's drinking and then there's a hangover and then there's a little grumpiness and then they're a normal person again. That's not true. Their behavior, and you start to feed into it, so that if you're abused as a result of that, if there's, and you go along with it, you accept it, you say it's okay, or you keep letting them back, that's supporting.
Being silent about it,
or
too.
Just being
Not
silent.
saying it.
Of a it says here you experienced denial of your husband's alcohol. He wasn't a drinker.
I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. I saw him drinking once in a while, 4 beers every night. That didn't mean anything.
Look here, he doesn't look alcoholic to me. He looks like the guy next door. Please don't, let me get to you. You do get to talk, Jim, I promise. Just hang on 1 second. 4 beers?
4 beers in the evening, that was habitual, but that didn't fit my pictures of an alcoholic.
Right.
And even once in a while, I mean, we'd go out to a bar, and Jim never had a drink. I mean, he had many drinks when we went, and he never, ever left a party without the drink in his hand. Going into the cab, which the drink would end up all over me and the cab, but he couldn't leave the party without that last to-go drink in his
How
hand.
were you enabling?
Mainly, I didn't say a word, not a word. I was fearful of confrontation, fearful of a fight the next day. I was busy making sure he wasn't going to leave me for the first 3 years of our marriage, you know.
And you also took care of the finances.
Well, he began to do
Everything
as little
he dropped,
as
you picked up.
Yes, exactly. He just absolutely backed off from all responsibility, you know, and I just took over. Wherever he didn't do it, I did it, and I began to do more and more and more.
Wendy, you nodded affirmatively.
Well, there's one thing. I mean, if I could say anything to people who think that they live with someone with a drinking or alcohol or drug problem, first of all, they probably do have a problem. Second of all, the thing that you are afraid of most usually is losing them. And what you don't realize, so you'll put up with anything because you don't want to lose them. And the thing that an alcoholic or a drug abuser will pull on you the most is, first of all, they'll find your weakness, but usually they will threaten to leave somehow. And that is what you will give up anything. Let them treat you in any way as long as you figure you can hang on to them. And that is the worst thing you can do for yourself, for the relationship, and for their sickness.
Yeah. Are you out of this relationship?
Yeah.
This must have been very painful. You really love this guy.
Absolutely. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him.
Was there something deep down inside, I'm asking,
Okay.
that said he's more fun when he's drinking?
I tell you what there was, absolutely, was that I think he would open up more. I think that alcoholics and people who use heavy substance abuse, I think that they're hurt in a lot of ways and very, very frightened, as are most people, and they don't want to open up, and perhaps they have been hurt. So whenever there's a problem, whenever there's confrontation, they drink. And what happens is, for us at least, is that he would start to open up. His heart would open up a little bit, and I would give anything for his heart to open up. So in a way, I did like it. But then it would go to the other extreme, where all the anger would come up that he suppressed. Everything is suppressed.
Yeah. It says in the literature that this affects everything. You've already made that point, including sex or intimacy.
Absolutely.
How? Less frequent or...
It depends on the person. Either sex is another addiction for them, and it's just sex, but intimacy is very different than sex. There wouldn't be intimacy, there would just be sex, because intimacy is very confronting, and it's very frightening for people, especially someone who doesn't want to show their emotions in the first place. It's terrifying. It's terrifying for most people who don't have that problem, to open up to another human being.
Did you just say, this is it, I'm out of here?
I said that. I tell you, if I could say to people, don't say anything that you don't mean. Because what I did, which was completely humiliating for me, is that I would set all these ultimatums. If you do this, if you have an affair with another woman, I'm out of here. If you treat me this way, I'm out of here. Well, he did all those things, and I still took him back. To the point where I realized, and I know he realized, that he could do anything he wanted, and I was still hopelessly in love with him. And then I just was at such a low point that I realized, first of all, there's things I have to do in this life. And something in me just said, pull yourself away, because this is only getting worse. So I crawled away, really.
How long did it take you to get hooked after you finally...
It's still a process, and I am still drawn to that type. I mean, I see a Mickey Rourke type on TV, or I'm like, it's exciting to me.
And Wendy, you also think that...
In other words, if you walk into a crowded cocktail party, you'll head straight for the person who will make you miserable.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
I'm trying to sort of look for the very enlightened, good person, but it's exciting. That sort of darkness is exciting.
Robin, you were saying.
No, just that that needing to be needed. Yeah. I think that is the personality that goes for someone with some kind of a dysfunction. Or like, I care much more about being needed than about being loved. I don't even know what that is, but I understand need. He needs me. He can't do without me. So that it serves me to have him be weak or...
Yeah. You understand the battered wife then, don't you, both of you? I mean, what's the difference?
It is worse almost, because there's no scars outside, and you think, okay, I should be fine, but you are so destroyed inside. The pain is like, I'm sure people know, it's like explosives destroying you inside.
How do you feel, Jim, listening in on this?
Well, I kind of want to represent the other side, but it goes together. It's a two-way street. I didn't know that I was sick. I'd grown up around alcohol. I used to be very proud of how much I could drink. It's a big thing. I could drink a quart. And then I went through a period, I spent a lot of time getting control of that. So I'd, stop drinking whiskey or, like that, and I'd drink beer. So I'd have these 3-4 beers a night. And I didn't know that I was sick. And she didn't, it was all just like transparent. Nobody saw anything until I tried to quit, really. And then I said, well, I'll only drink when I have a special occasion. And then I'd invite friends to come to town and take them to a restaurant and spend $100 so we'd have a special occasion. I mean, maybe I got a more serious problem than I thought.
Is it true that sometimes in those restaurants you didn't even eat?
Well, eating was the least important thing that happened. But it might be just to have 5 or 6 beers. It was like just so that I could have that. I had no idea.
How long have you been dry, and are you?
Yeah, about 2 years.
I know you're going to say he's just a lot better guy now that he's not on...
Well, he's a very, very different person. Very different.
How is he different?
Jim lived in another world. There was no real reality. I mean, things like banking and taking care of the money and work, but mainly just the responsibility of the household. Of the real things that adults need to do and take care of in their lives. He didn't want to deal with any of that. So I kept doing everything.
But it's not just that I didn't want to. I didn't have to. I got to say, I didn't have to, because before I ever got to think about it, she took over the bank book. She took over that stuff. I mean, really, I didn't have to think about it.
Did she threaten to divorce you?
No, I threatened to divorce her.
Right, he was the one that was always out the door.
Really?
If a check bounced, he threatened to divorce her.
No kidding. He threatened to divorce you because you were nagging him.
That's normal. That's what they use more than anything
we
else.
both agree. Whatever was wrong is her
more
fault.
More than anything else.
I was the wrong one in the relationship.
Wouldn't this be a mothering thing with the women, to where you're mothering someone?
I think nurturing, gets, it's almost like the, the other side of it or something, you know, carried to an extreme.
Yes, ma'am.
Did either one of you ladies come from an alcoholic parent?
No.
No.
But, you know, there is this word that's being passed around, which is dysfunctional home. And we talked about this before, Robin Norwood's book, Women Who Love Too Much. She says, Jim,
In which the most important issues were not discussed.
and I think that, you know, we could say we're all from dysfunctional
Yeah,
families
absolutely.
in that sense. In my family, the issue was money. We didn't talk about money. That was...
I was wondering, and I don't mean to get insulting, but do you have a poor self-image? You know, when you talk about he might leave and I'll do anything to keep him, are you so insecure in your...
I think that is the key to the entire thing, and this is hard to hear, but I truly believe that you do not allow anything in your life that you don't think that you deserve on some level. In other words, someone cannot make you feel insecure without you going along with it. You know, they do not make you. If someone says to you, for instance, and someone says to you, you're stupid, you'll laugh. But if they hit that thing inside of you that feels insecure, and they look for those things, it's like a little hook. It's that little hook that hooks you. And absolutely. So the key is the more you can love yourself, the more loving your relationships will be, is what you'll draw to you.
You said that you didn't know he was an alcoholic. Was there like a specific incident where you say, okay, he's an alcoholic now, what should I do about it?
Boy, I was dense. I was even during some really awful incidences when Jim would be, you know, very drunk and my family would be around and I would be humiliated and embarrassed. All of that went on, and I still denied.
Yeah.
But Jim began to go to AA, and that's when, you know, he said, hey, you know, I have a he had to come to me and say, I have a problem. And even then, I said, oh, Jim, he's just, you know, this is one of his Get Better programs. He's not really an alcoholic.
Was he hostile, aggressive, lethargic, funny, sleepy, drunk, or what?
Jim is a philosopher. He would sit and read Heidegger for hours on end, drinking beer and reading Heidegger. And he would tune out. He would just not be available. You know, there wouldn't be another person in the house to be with, to play with.
How about your live-in person?
What kind of a drunk was he? He was pretty shut down as far as any emotions go. And whenever there would be any sort of a confrontation, basically it was go out with the boys, and he was a real socialite. He was very smooth, and also he would tell me that he was. I think he was actually less of one than I believed. That's another thing they do, is tell you every woman in the world is lined up at the door waiting for him, so you better watch it, because, you know. So he was more the type that would just avoid, go out, have a good time.
Did you drink
Party.
at all?
I drank more in the beginning of the relationship because he always bought me another drink, and I thought, what the heck? And then I'm very health conscious, and I started to feel it just didn't feel right for me. And as I saw what was really going on, I became against liquor altogether, and I didn't drink at all.
How about cocaine?
I can't stand it. That was the worst. Drink, just please, it's okay to drink. When he would do cocaine, he was gone. He was ice cold, and I could see this look in his eyes. All I want is another line. You'd be standing anywhere. All I want is another line. You did not exist. At least with alcohol, that was okay to me because his heart would open up, and he'd cry, and he'd feel love. But cocaine was like ice. And what it would do to him, he would come home at night, and this was like 4 in the morning, and his heart was beating so fast. And he would pass out dead to where I could lift him up in the bed, and he would slam back down again and not wake up. And his heart was beating that fast all night long.
You understand these athletes who died. Do you understand the chemical response?
Absolutely. And I would tell him, but the whole thing was, my first response when he would come home at night was like, to feel his heart. And now I realize, and I'd say, honey, you got to take care of yourself, da-da-da-da. I realize now that as long as I was obsessed with taking care of him, he didn't have to be.
He came home to to Florence Nightingale.
And I would give him vitamins next morning. You need this, you need B vitamins, you need to eat this, you need a little young food, you need this.
Gold, MD. Dr. Gold is Director of Research for Fair Oaks Hospital, a drug abuse treatment center in New Jersey that has quite a reputation for helping people in this circumstance. No surprises here, huh, for you?
No
What do you
sur-
want to add? Anything?
Well,
I mean, boy, they're really rolling here. This is.
They are,
I
really.
thank them for their candor. This is important.
I think there are a lot of important messages. One thing is everyone's talking about when they knew that the person was an addict. And we have to realize that most people who are using drugs and alcohol are out there and don't go recognized. You may be sitting next to an addict right now. So it's very difficult to put the burden on them and say, when did you realize this and what about the switch? The next thing is, what does it mean to be an enabler? I mean, it's a complicated thing. One thing might be just to learn CPR. So if, your cocaine-using boyfriend has a heart attack, you resuscitate him. But there are other things. We've had enablers come into the hospital saying things like, I wanted my husband to use less drugs, so I started to switch sugar in his cocaine. Or, so that the person would use less. They hide the alcohol. They hide the drugs. A dentist who had an enabler for a wife, she would call the morning appointments to reschedule them. And so what happens is the time for truth is delayed. The person allows the addict to go closer and closer to this confrontation with a brick wall. And unfortunately, it makes it more difficult for them to recover. And it also, the longer that it persists, the enabler develops more of a disease themselves. And then they have a hard time, even if the person gets into recovery. It's hard enough for them to learn how to deal with an alcoholic or a drug addict, but then they have to learn how to deal with a recovering alcoholic and how to make a life for themselves.
I would like to know, how does a person, become an alcoholic? Can it be like or from friends or just work?
Part of it is. I mean, we know now that alcoholism is a disease. Now, people who drank and became alcoholics knew this well in advance of doctors. That alcoholism is transmitted in families, that people acquire a risk. Then they drink, and a certain % of people become alcoholics. The same thing probably applies to cocaine. The difference would be that a higher % of people who've ever tried cocaine become cocaine addicts. And it may just be differences in genetics, it may be differences in the way the drugs affect the brain, but the changes the person. I don't have a disease. And then the people around them, maybe 4 to 8 people, say, that really isn't a disease. I know somebody that's worse. It's easy to look at enablers and say the only one that could be an enabler is a boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse. But some of the greatest enablers are employers and agents. Agents for ball players, agents for football players, agents for stars, who are in the bind of minimizing, denying, allowing the drug use to continue because the star says the same thing that they say, I'm going to leave and find an agent who'll leave me alone. And it's again delayed, longer and longer till they get into treatment. And then sometimes the person has such a bad disease that they'll never get better.
When Jim started going to AA, he suggested that I go to Al-Anon. And I did. I went to my first meeting, but I was very angry, very, very upset and angry that we were at this point in our lives having to deal with this issue. I mean, all my friends were buying co-ops, and they were doing all these upwardly mobile things. And my husband comes home and says, I'm an alcoholic. I made it through the past 2 years without Al-Anon.
But did you find yourself impatient with his non-helplessness? I'm trying to figure out.
You mean
Yeah,
what
how'd
happened
you do
when he
when he-
when he? Well, it's a
Hey, this
constant
is a terrible
struggle.
thing. There are some people who think that there's
No.
nothing worse than a recovering alcoholic.
Recently, it's true. Recently, no,
It is true?
It is. I mean, it's really, really difficult. Recently, I mean, this took over all the finances, and Jim was doing.
And you started to drink. That's
I-
just a joke. It's all right.
I
Miss
was in a
Elson.
panic. I was in an absolute panic. Jim was sitting there doing our bank statements, and I was standing over him like this. Hovering. Like, is he going to make a mistake? What are you doing? No, 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 no. And he just said, go in the other room. And it's very hard for me to let go.
This is not a challenge which you had, is it, Wendy?
No, not at all.
Because it really didn't.
The thing is that if say to people was that it has to be their choice. I mean, that's the thing. It is no one else's choice, no matter how much you love them. And you think, well, if he really loved me, wouldn't he stop drinking from me? It is their life. It is their...
You have to wonder now about your emotional capacity to form a mutually beneficial relationship, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
with a person who isn't helpless.
Well, yeah, and in fact, I think that you can't really have a relationship until you have a good relationship with yourself. All that any relationship ever gives you is the closest mirroring of your own relationship to yourself, really. And as that improves, I mean, that's what I'm dealing with now. As that improves, the mirror also improves.
That's like the second step in the recovery from a codependency. The first would be deal with the denial. Say you have a problem. And after that, you have to say, I have a life.
Yeah. Guilt's in this too, isn't it?
Guilt's in it. And, I look at it and I say, well, one of the things that you could look at is why do we have all what other instances are there for enablers? And a big one that comes to mind is that people who live with a person who has depression or another mental disorder as well, where there's a lot of guilt. They don't tell anyone,
What people don't realize is that alcoholism is a disease, and it does not get better. I was always hoping that perhaps if things got better in his life, maybe he'd lighten up. Alcoholism does not get better. It only gets worse until you either have what's called wet brain, which is basically you're, an idiot, or you die. That's it. Or you stop.
No, it's very true. People think, maybe if I won the lottery, that's the cocaine.
Yeah.
That's the cocaine user's nightmare. To win the lottery and then die because you have unlimited access.
Brian, let's look at these. We'll go through. Many of you have seen these before. Family or social problems caused by drinking. Next slide. Job or financial difficulties related to drinking. Loss of consistent ability to control drinking. Blackouts or inability to remember what happened while drinking. Distressing physical and or psychological reactions. Leave that up there a second.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this. Distressing physical and or psychological reactions if you tried to stop drinking. Did he get cranky? Was he cranky at first? What was the...
When he first stopped drinking,
Did you think you were living with a stranger? I mean, how?
absolutely. But mainly, he went to AA meetings all the time, and I felt very left out. So that was really the first thing. I felt he isolated from me a great. When I'd ask him about the AA meetings and what went on, he would get very irritated with me, and it was like, you won't understand. You don't. He pushed me. I felt that he was pushing me away, and I'd been replaced by these meetings.
Yes, I'd like the doctor to expound a little bit about the different types of enablers there are. You just mentioned a couple, but are there more?
Sure, there are. I mean, you have, up here we have people in adult relationships, but you could be a parent and have a child who's using drugs and alcohol, and imagine that bond. Parent, you really do feel that you're in control. It's your household, this is your child, and the dependency and the independence, the conflicts there are exactly. That's one to remember. People who are codependents. Another thing that happens is people may not recognize their codependence. They frequently go to doctors with anxiety attacks, backaches, ulcers, high blood pressure, depression, before they realize that the 4 drinks is alcoholism and that they are codependent.
Enablers or codependents, they are now finding, are the highest group of chronically ill people in the world.
They go for...
People who are always...
Right.
There's always some stress-related
If you're helping someone
problem.
else, you get worn out and you're...
You get worn out, there's stomach problems, there's back problems, there's
also
headaches.
a lot of blame. I blamed whatever was wrong in our marriage. I blamed myself. I didn't say, oh, Jim has a problem, there's something wrong with Jim. I said all the time, whatever went on, it was my problem, I was wrong.
Let's show them the numbers. This is really ominous. Did you know this? That 61 million people have used marijuana in the United States? Only 18 claim to currently use it. You got to wonder how truthful that is. Next slide. 22.2 million of us, 164 million of us have used it, and 113 million of us claim to be using it now. Here we get down to the real nub of this. Almost everybody drinks.
Except people in AA.
Except people in AA, true. Yeah, and let's say this. There's this pretty healthy slice of folks who really don't care for it. Thank you. I hope they're grateful for the snake that they even avoided fooling around with. It is also true to say, in my opinion, that almost everybody who drinks occasionally gets drunk. So it looks like we've got this, on the issue of alcohol, our most popular form of mind-altering drug, we've got a situation here where it is not realistic to expect a community of 240 million people, as we claim in the United States, to have it this freely available, this widely and romantically advertised. You know, we put Budweiser and Coors on the side of race cars. On the side of race cars. And we wonder why we're on our way to the emergency room the night of the prom. It's like, it's not something that 240 million people can do without a significant percentage falling over the edge occasionally, and for some poor souls, that's the one time when they cross the yellow line. And there you go with somebody's face all over the windshield. I'm not sure I know what to do about this. I'll tell you this, it makes me more respectful of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. I'm not kidding, this is not a gag. Obviously, we tried it, and prohibition doesn't work, but I'm not sure we're bringing all our mental faculties to the business of really controlling this ubiquitous
The
product.
problem is not the substance. The problem is our relationship to it
That's
or to
right.
a person.
That's right.
That's why it's a societal problem, and it's something that you have to look in with yourself. It really,
But we
there
don't
is
have
disease.
240 million people who are capable of doing that.
Right.
And if I'm out of work and my girl just left me and my father won't talk to me,
You better start looking at why.
I'm gonna have a drink. I'm sorry. I mean, this is the way it works, and feel like somebody.
And hopefully it'll be bad enough when you do that when you wake up the next morning, maybe you'll then hear about AA or something.
Well, you know, if you look at all these drugs, one drug after another, how could we get fooled by cocaine? Why is cocaine addicting? I say, you know, to have any impact in the culture at large, we have to stop thinking that somewhere out there is a new drug that's going to be safe. And think we say we want a medication to be safe and then proven effective. For a drug of abuse, we say, I'll try it and we'll see what happens because probably it's safe. And then we find out later it isn't safe.
The main thing that you need to do is learn about the disease so that you recognize it, and then learn about your own disease. Then you can work it.
Those other areas are places where I mistrust. That's